Lisa Bonet finally confirms The Cosby Show. Darkest secrets. There are moments in history when the facade of perfection crumbles and what once seemed like an unshakable institution reveals a dark, sinister truth lurking beneath. The Cosby Show for many was the epitome of family values, a beacon of success, love, and harmony, bringing America's ideal family to the small screen. But what if everything we thought we knew about this show and the man behind it was nothing more than an illusion? Lisa Bonet, who portrayed the rebellious yet lovable Denise Huxtable, always had a certain energy that stood out. She was the character who didn't follow the rules, the one who wasn't afraid to be different. But behind those scenes of laughter and light, Bonet was sensing something far darker. Long before the world knew the allegations, she saw the cracks in the Cosby empire, cracks that would eventually shatter its seemingly perfect image. In this video, we take a deep dive into the hidden truths of The Cosby Show, uncovering the uncomfortable reality that Lisa Bonet tried to warn us about all along. From her quiet departure to the chilling secrets that were whispered behind closed doors, the truth is far more complex than a simple sitcom. Was the legendary Bill Cosby truly the man America thought he was? Or was he someone else entirely? Stay with us as we reveal the truth that has been hiding in plain sight for decades, a truth that was too dangerous for some to acknowledge. The story behind the smile, the show, and the scandal might just change the way you look at everything. Bill Cosby's rise to fame was unlike many of his peers. Born in 1937 in the slums of North Philadelphia, Cosby's journey from humble beginnings to becoming one of the most recognizable figures in American entertainment was nothing short of extraordinary. Raised by his single mother, Cosby grew up in a neighborhood riddled with crime and poverty, yet his mother instilled in him the importance of education and discipline. These values would shape his future as he navigated the treacherous waters of show business. Cosby's first foray into entertainment was as a stand-up comedian. He had a natural gift for making people laugh, blending observational humor with a sharp wit. His style was clean, appealing to mainstream audiences, and he quickly rose to prominence. By the early 1960s, Cosby was a regular on the nightclub circuit, performing in front of packed audiences. But it wasn't just his jokes that captured people's attention. It was the way he portrayed life with an understanding of both the struggles and joys of everyday existence. His humor was grounded in truth, making it relatable to a diverse audience. In 1965, Cosby made history by becoming the first black actor to star in a primetime television show, I Spy. The show was groundbreaking for several reasons. Not only was Cosby a trailblazer in terms of representation on screen, but his character was a far cry from the stereotypical roles black actors were typically relegated to. Cosby's role as a suave, intellectual secret agent was a game changer, and it earned him an Emmy Award, making him the first African American to win the prestigious award. This victory solidified his place in Hollywood and signaled that the industry was ready for a new kind of black star, one who wasn't just the sidekick or comic relief, but was complex, capable, and respected. However, Cosby wasn't content with simply being an actor. He had a vision to reshape the portrayal of black families on television. At the time, TV was saturated with shows that either ignored the black experience or portrayed black families as living in poverty, struggling in a way that often perpetuated negative stereotypes. Cosby wanted to change that to show black families as they were successful, loving, and striving toward the American dream. This vision led to The Cosby Show, which debuted in 1984 on NBC. What made the show revolutionary wasn't just the fact that it was a sitcom about a black family, but how it portrayed that family. The Huxtables, led by Dr. Cliff Huxtable Cosby, were a successful upper-middle-class family living in a Brooklyn brownstone. They weren't fighting poverty or battling systemic oppression. They were just living their lives, facing the everyday challenges that families of all races experience. Cosby's character, Cliff Huxtable, was a loving father and an obstetrician. A man who balanced work and family with humor and grace. His wife, Claire, played by the stunningly talented Felicia Rashad, was a strong, intelligent attorney who, together with Cliff, raised their 5 children. The family dynamics were portrayed with warmth, humor, and authenticity, making it a hit among audiences of all backgrounds. The show didn't just entertain, it became a cultural touchstone, reshaping the way America viewed black families and paving the way for future black sitcoms. The Huxtable children were as unforgettable as their parents. Sandra, the oldest, had her life together and was often the voice of reason. Theo, the only boy, was a lovable troublemaker with a big heart. Vanessa, who often struggled with wanting to be heard, found herself caught between childhood and adolescence. Rudy, the youngest, was a scene stealer with her sass and adorable cuteness. Together, the Huxtables were the picture of the American family, relatable, loving, and inspirational. But then there was Denise, played by Lisa Bonet. Denise wasn't like the others. She was the free spirit, the bohemian dreamer who didn't quite fit the mold of the perfect daughter. With her wild hair and eclectic style, Denise was rebellious, outspoken, and different. She wasn't just a character, she became a cultural icon. Girls everywhere wanted to be like her, and her fashion choices sparked trends that were copied by young women across the country. Bonet's portrayal of Denise was one of the standout elements of the show. She brought a raw energy to the character, making Denise feel more real than the typical TV daughter. She wasn't just there to play the part. She brought a level of depth and nuance that resonated with audiences. As Denise Bonet was relatable to anyone who had ever felt like they didn't quite fit in, whether at home, school, or in society. But despite the Cosby Show's overwhelming success, the cracks began to show behind the scenes. While Bill Cosby was lauded for his vision, his insistence on control became a point of tension. He was the mastermind behind the show, and his need to maintain a perfect public image extended beyond the screen. Cosby wasn't just the star of The Cosby Show. He was its driving force, and every aspect of the show had to align with his vision. As the show progressed, Bonet's role as Denise became less prominent. Initially, her character was one of the most memorable, but as Cosby's control over the show tightened, Denise's screen time dwindled. Cosby was known to run a tight ship, and anyone who didn't conform to his vision was quickly sidelined. Bonet's desire to branch out and take on more complex roles didn't fit into Cosby's perfect family image. She wanted to grow as an actress, to step outside of the boundaries set for her character. But Cosby was reluctant to let her go. His empire, built on the ideal of the perfect black family, was at risk of crumbling if his star Denise stepped too far away from the mold. Despite the tension, Cosby offered Bonet a spin-off, A Different World, which followed Denise's college years at Hillman University. This was, in theory, an opportunity for Bonet to explore her character's growth and development outside the confines of the Huxtable household. But even in this new show, Cosby was still pulling the strings. Bonet was the face of the show, but Cosby was the architect behind it, choosing the writers, the showrunners, and even the direction of the stories. It was a subtle but powerful way to keep her within his reach. As Bonet's personal life began to unfold, so did the tension between her and Cosby. In 1987, she married musician Lenny Kravitz, and shortly after she announced she was pregnant with their child. The news sent shockwaves through the Cosby Show set. Cosby, who had worked so hard to build a reputation of wholesomeness and family values, didn't know how to handle the situation. The pregnancy was an unwelcome complication to his vision. And while Bonet's personal life blossomed, Cosby's carefully crafted family image began to fray at the edges. Bonet's growing independence and willingness to explore roles that challenged societal norms were at odds with Cosby's more conservative approach. When she signed on to star in the film Angel Heart, a psychological thriller with dark themes and explicit content, it was clear that Bonet was no longer content with just being America's ideal daughter. She was an actress who wanted to stretch her creative wings, and that meant taking on roles that might not fit with Cosby's vision. For Cosby, this was more than just a difference in artistic direction. It was a threat to his empire, to the image he had carefully cultivated over decades. And so he did what he had done before he took control. Bonet's appearance on The Cosby Show became more infrequent, and her departure from a different world seemed inevitable. Lisa Bonet's career trajectory was forever altered by the tension between her and Cosby. What began as a bright future on a hit show became a quiet battle for artistic freedom and personal independence. As she navigated Hollywood and her personal life, she found herself increasingly at odds with the very man who had helped make her a star. And though the public never fully knew the extent of their conflict, the cracks were beginning to show, cracks that would only deepen as the years went on. In the end, Lisa Bonet wasn't just a character on a TV show. She was a symbol of a struggle between freedom and control, between personal identity and public image. And as we'll see in the next chapter, that struggle would define her relationship with Bill Cosby, a man who had once been a mentor but was now a source of growing discomfort and distrust. Bill Cosby's rise to fame is a story of perseverance, vision, and a deep understanding of American culture. From his humble beginnings to his establishment as one of the most influential figures in television, Cosby's journey was nothing short of extraordinary. But behind the scenes, his quest for perfection and control would leave a lasting impact on the lives of those who worked with him, particularly Lisa Bonet. Cosby's first taste of fame came with his groundbreaking role in I Spy in 1965. The show, which aired on NBC, was a pivotal moment in American television history. Not only was it a hit for its gripping storytelling and suspense, but it also featured Bill Cosby as a leading man, a groundbreaking moment for African Americans on television. Cosby's character, Alexander Scott, was a suave and intelligent secret agent who stood apart from the typical roles black actors were given. His portrayal was sophisticated, charismatic, and deeply human, shattering stereotypes about black characters in Hollywood. The success of I Spy was a huge turning point for Cosby. He became the first African American to win an Emmy for his performance in the series, cementing his place in Hollywood. But Cosby wasn't satisfied with just being a trailblazer in the world of television. He wanted to reshape the entire landscape of entertainment. His vision was to create a sitcom that would break free from the stereotypical portrayals of black families. And in 1984, he did just that. The Cosby Show debuted on NBC and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. The series was groundbreaking for its portrayal of the Huxtable family headed by Dr. Cliff Huxtable, Bill Cosby, and his wife, Claire Felicia Rashad. The show focused on the day-to-day lives of an affluent black family in Brooklyn, New York, breaking away from the usual depictions of black families as poor or struggling. This was a family that had it together, that laughed, fought, and loved in ways that were universal and relatable. For Cosby, The Cosby Show wasn't just another sitcom. It was a platform for his deeper message. Through the Huxtables, Cosby showed the world that black families could be successful, loving, and dynamic. It wasn't about overcoming hardship or fighting against societal obstacles every week. It was about the human experience. The Huxtables were a reflection of the American dream, and Cosby worked tirelessly to ensure that this message was clear. The show's success was immediate. It became the highest-rated show in America and brought in an audience of over 30 million viewers per week. NBC, which had been struggling with its programming lineup, found its savior in The Cosby Show. The ratings were through the roof, and the show garnered critical acclaim, winning Emmys, Golden Globes, and NAACP Image Awards. Cosby's creative control over the show allowed him to keep the stories authentic, and the family dynamic at the heart of the show resonated deeply with viewers of all backgrounds. But as much as Cosby was celebrated for his role as Dr. Huxtable, his increasing control over the show became an issue. He was no longer just a star. He was the show's architect. While this gave him immense power, it also created tension with his co-stars and the cast, especially Lisa Bonet. Bonet's character, Denise Huxtable, was unlike any other character on television at the time. She wasn't the perfect daughter. In fact, she was a bit of a rebel. Denise had a free-spirited bohemian style that was both refreshing and relatable. She was quirky, independent, and didn't conform to societal expectations. Her wild hair, layered outfits, and rebellious nature made her a breakout character. Denise was more than just a character on a show. She was a cultural icon. Young women everywhere wanted to dress like her, talk like her, and be like her. She became a symbol of youthful rebellion, a new kind of TV character who wasn't afraid to stand out. But while Bonet was gaining fame and recognition for her portrayal of Denise, she was also experiencing growing tension with Cosby. She wasn't just playing a role, she was beginning to develop her own identity as an actress and as a woman. And that wasn't something that sat well with Cosby, whose vision for the show was to maintain a carefully crafted image. Denise, with her messy hair and free-spirited personality, didn't quite fit into the mold of the perfect controlled family that Cosby had worked so hard to create. Cosby, who had built an empire on family values, didn't understand why Bonet was stepping out of the box. He began to view her increasing independence as a threat, and the cracks in their relationship started to appear. But it wasn't just Cosby who had a problem with Bonet's rising fame. As Bonet became more popular, there was a sense of jealousy among some of the other cast members. They had worked hard to become part of this new phenomenon, but Bonet was quickly becoming the star of the show. And while Cosby had always prided himself on his ability to nurture talent, he began to feel that Bonet was no longer just an actress under his control. She was an actress who wanted to challenge the norms he had set. In 1987, Bonet made the decision to step outside of the Cosby Show world and pursue other projects. This wasn't an act of rebellion, but rather a natural evolution in her career. She took on a daring role in the film Angel Heart, a psychological thriller that was a far cry from the wholesome, family-friendly atmosphere of The Cosby Show. In this film, Bonet portrayed Epiphany Proudfoot, a character involved in voodoo mystery and a steamy love scene with co-star Mickey Rourke that almost earned the movie an X rating. The film was controversial, gritty, and intense, the complete opposite of the family-friendly image that Cosby had worked to create. It was a decision that showed Bonet was no longer content with just being the cute daughter on a sitcom. She was an actress who wanted to stretch her range and take on more complex, challenging roles. But Cosby didn't see it that way. He saw Angel Heart as a threat to the image of the Huxtable family, and he didn't like it. Bonet's move to a more mature, risque role was seen as unprofessional in Cosby's eyes, and it deepened the rift between the two. To Cosby, this was more than just a film role. It was an act of betrayal. He had built an empire around the wholesome image of The Cosby Show, and Bonet's choices were threatening that image. As Bonet's career outside of the show began to take off, Cosby's control over the show and over her character tightened. He began to make it clear that if she wanted to remain a part of The Cosby Show, she needed to fall back into line. The tension between them reached its peak when Bonet became pregnant with her first child by then-husband Lenny Kravitz. Rather than adjusting the show to reflect Bonet's pregnancy, Cosby made the decision to pull her from a different world. The public's image of Bill Cosby as America's dad was meticulously crafted over decades. His role as Dr. Cliff Huxtable on The Cosby Show was that of the perfect father, embodying the ideals of wisdom, warmth, and reliability. Yet beneath the smile and the sweater was a man whose dark side was far from the image he presented. It's a story that became increasingly clear to those who worked with him, including Lisa Bonet, but the world didn't know the full truth until decades later. From the early days of The Cosby Show, a sense of unease lingered behind the scenes. Cast and crew members would later reveal that Cosby's behavior was not as wholesome as his on-screen persona suggested. There were whispers of Cosby's controlling nature, his intense need to maintain a perfect image, and the subtle but growing tension between him and those closest to him, including Bonet. At first, these were just rumors, but as the years passed, more and more of his dark secrets began to surface. In 2014 and 2015, the lid on Cosby's carefully constructed life came crashing down. Dozens of women began to come forward with allegations of sexual assault, drugging, and harassment. What had once been dismissed as open secrets within Hollywood and on the set of The Cosby Show became an undeniable, horrifying reality. Women from all walks of life, actresses, models, even former employees came forward to share their stories of Cosby's alleged misconduct. Each account painted a picture of a man who used his power and influence to manipulate and violate women for decades. For those who had worked closely with Cosby, these revelations were not entirely shocking. In fact, many of the cast and crew members of The Cosby Show had known of his infidelities and inappropriate behavior, even if they didn't fully understand the extent of it. Joseph C. Phillips, who played Denise Huxtable's husband on The Cosby Show, publicly spoke out about what he described as an open secret. He confessed that Cosby's infidelity and womanizing were widely known among the cast, but the severity of the accusations didn't sink in until a woman he knew personally confided in him that she had been drugged and assaulted by Cosby. This moment, Phillips said, was when he realized the full extent of the man he had once called a mentor. For Lisa Bonet, the signs were always there, though she had kept quiet for years. When asked in interviews if she had ever sensed something dark about Cosby, her answer was blunt, always. It was a statement that spoke volumes without saying much. Bonet, who had been one of the first to break free from Cosby's control, knew far more than she had let on. Her departure from The Cosby Show, her sudden exclusion from a different world, and her quiet distance from Cosby all seemed to be driven by an instinctive understanding that something was terribly wrong. Bonet's departure from the show in the late 1980s after her pregnancy was not just due to creative differences or her own personal choices. In hindsight, it seems as though Bonet was trying to escape a situation that had grown uncomfortable not just creatively, but on a deeper, more troubling level. Cosby's control over the show and her role had become stifling, and the tension between them only worsened after she made a name for herself outside of his empire. But it wasn't just Bonet who had felt the shift in the air. Cosby's relationships with his co-stars were also strained by the growing whispers of his behavior. Phylicia Rashad, who played Claire Huxtable, remained fiercely loyal to Cosby throughout the scandal, continuing to defend him publicly, even as the allegations mounted. But her statements only fueled the fire, with critics accusing her of turning a blind eye to the truth. Rashad later tried to backtrack, saying that her comments had been taken out of context, but the damage had already been done. In stark contrast, Malcolm Jamal Warner, who portrayed Theo Huxtable, took a more cautious approach. His statements about Cosby's fall from grace were filled with sorrow and confusion. "I feel sad, just the way this whole story is," he said, clearly torn between the man he once admired and the stories now coming to light. It was a sentiment echoed by many of the show's cast members who found themselves grappling with the harsh truth of the man they had once trusted. But perhaps the most poignant response came from Bonet herself. For years, she had stayed silent, refusing to get involved in the public debate. In a 2018 interview with Porter magazine, she finally opened up, saying simply, "I knew enough." There was no bitterness in her tone. No anger or accusations, just a calm resignation. Bonet's words were a quiet, powerful acknowledgement of the truth that so many had been unwilling to confront. It was clear that Bonet had always understood the dark reality of Bill Cosby. While others continued to defend him, she had seen through the facade. Her quiet exit from the show, her creative choices, and her distance from him were all signs of her refusal to be part of the lie. The truth was always there, hidden beneath the surface, but it took decades for the world to finally acknowledge it. The Cosby Show, which had once been a shining example of success and representation, was now tainted by the revelations of Cosby's personal life. The perfect family, the warm laughs, and the lessons about love and respect were overshadowed by the dark secrets of the man who had created it all. For Lisa Bonet, the truth had always been clear, and her silence in the face of it was perhaps the most telling response of all. In the end, Bill Cosby's rise to fame was not just a tale of success, but one of deception. The man who had once been heralded as a cultural icon was now seen as a symbol of the dangers of unchecked power and the lengths to which people would go to protect their reputations. His conviction in 2018 for the assault of Andrea Constand marked a public reckoning, but for many, the damage had already been done. The dark side of Cosby's legacy will forever overshadow the contributions he made to television and the lives of those who believed in his image of family love and success. It was a fall from grace that no one could have predicted, not even the women who had trusted him, who, like Lisa Bonet, knew the truth long before it came to light. The story of Bill Cosby, once revered as America's dad, is a painful reminder of how easily we can be deceived by the carefully crafted masks that celebrities wear. For decades, the Huxtables gave us a perfect picture of family life, but behind that flawless image, there was a darkness that no one saw coming. Lisa Bonet, perhaps more than anyone, understood this truth. She saw through Cosby's public persona long before the world caught up, sensing the sinister energy that would later define the downfall of a cultural icon. Her quiet exit, her decision to distance herself from Cosby, was not just about creative differences. It was about survival. It was her way of protecting herself from a man who demanded control over every aspect of his empire and everyone in it. For Bonet, the ultimate revelation wasn't just about escaping the suffocating grip of Cosby's influence. It was about preserving her own integrity, her own sense of truth, even when the world still believed in the lie. What was most heartbreaking about Cosby's fall from grace wasn't just the countless women who had their lives destroyed by his actions, but the fact that so many were willing to turn a blind eye for the sake of the legacy he had built. The truth was there in plain sight for years, yet it took decades for it to finally be acknowledged. Cosby's conviction in 2018, though, an important moment of justice, was just one part of a much larger story. His reign as one of Hollywood's most beloved figures had ended, but the wounds he left behind are far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Lisa Bonet's story, though quieter and more subdued than the rest, is one of the most powerful. Her refusal to conform to Cosby's vision, her desire to carve out her own identity and truth, is a testament to the strength of character and independence. It was her journey from the bright-eyed star of The Cosby Show to the quiet, thoughtful woman who stepped away from it all that told the real story. A story that for too long had been hidden behind the success of one man's empire. As we reflect on the legacy of Bill Cosby, we must also acknowledge the bravery of those like Lisa Bonet, who stood up to the toxic forces behind the fame. Their voices, even in silence, speak volumes. The truth always finds a way to come out, no matter how much we try to bury it. If you want to learn more about the hidden stories behind Black excellence and the lives of iconic figures, be sure to subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence. Join us as we uncover the untold truths and celebrate the real journeys of the people who shaped history.